Welcome, Crossover Report. Three guys, one mic on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon here, right towards the end of March. And March Madness has been in full swing the last 2 weeks. And now the Final Four has been set after this past weekend. We had Sweet 16 games along with Elite Eight play. So going to give kind of our overview, talk about those games, kind of give some of our opinions and thoughts. In this video, as always, Paul Lamb, Nick Damiani, and myself, Neil Doyle. So let's jump into it. Obviously, this past Thursday and Friday were all the Sweet 16 games. You know, nothing too crazy in a lot of the Sweet 16 games. A lot of the teams who were supposed to win won. And there weren't really any too crazy upsets. Kansas obviously defeated Maryland. Villanova took care of Miami pretty handily in the South region. So those two played each other in the Elite Eight. And then down in the West, Oregon defeated Duke. Oklahoma moved on. The two higher seeds over in the Midwest region, Syracuse moved on over Gonzaga. That was a really good game in the Sweet 16. Virginia beat Iowa State. Notre Dame, Wisconsin was another good one in the Sweet 16 in the East region. Notre Dame moved on. And then, obviously, North Carolina took care of Indiana pretty easily in the Sweet 16. So they moved on to the Elite Eight. And as we said, nothing too crazy. Was there anything that stood out to you guys in the Sweet 16? I know we said those two games that were better were those two higher seeds, those two higher game seeds with Notre Dame, Wisconsin, and then Gonzaga, Syracuse. Any other games that maybe stood out in your mind in the Sweet 16? Nick, anything off the top of your head or not really?
Nothing was too surprising. I guess I would say I thought two number ones were going to go down in the Sweet 16. I definitely thought Duke was going to beat Oregon. I thought they were playing really good, and I still hadn't seen anything from Oregon. I didn't know anything about Oregon, to be honest with you. I saw they had no players that were projected to go to the NBA. So I was actually kind of surprised how Oregon handled Duke that easily. And then if you guys want to talk, we talk about the Coach K's comments about that. If you heard about that.
You can bring it up. Yeah.
We want to talk about it.
You want to talk about it now? Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah, we want to talk about it.
Oh, you do? Oh, so what'd you think about it?
I thought that Coach K, I don't think the kid was showboating Dylan Brooks or whatever at the end. But I think when you're Coach K and you have that many championships, he seemed like a sore loser, but he has the right to do it. If he thinks something's wrong, he's got enough pedigree that he can tell. It's not like it was like, I wrote an article about that. It's not like it was Brad Stevens telling LeBron James he did something wrong. It was one of the greatest coaches of all time telling a 21-year-old kid, look, you don't need to be doing all that. So even if you think it's right or wrong, I think Coach K didn't step outside of his rights as a coach.
I totally agree with Paul on that. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time, so he's got the right to say what he wants, and he's been in this game long enough to where he knows what's acceptable and what not. Obviously Oregon never really made it this far in a tournament in quite some time, and so obviously this team's going to be pretty elated, and Duke's always there every year in the tournament. They make runs, it seems like, if not every other year. So I think Coach K's been there a lot more, so maybe that's why he made those comments, but I don't think he had any wrong in doing so.
Yeah.
Nick, any comment on that or what?
Right, I agree with both of you guys. I mean, it's not like he was bashing the kid. I feel like a lot of people were making it sound like he was bashing him. He said he respected the kid. He said the kid played a good game and all that. And like you said, he has the right to say that, for being honest. Not many other coaches could say that.
Yeah. Where he went wrong was in the post-game press conference where he was like, oh, Dylan Brooks, I didn't say any of that he said that I said. He basically called Dylan Brooks a liar. And it's just like, dude, it's okay. Like, if you just say, yeah, I told him that, nobody's going to get on your ass as hard, but he lied about saying that.
Right, and the kid said he was right. He said Coach K was right.
Exactly.
So, again, got a lot of respect for that guy, too, for at least that.
You're right.
And then, the UVA Iowa State game, I thought Iowa State, I wasn't for sure on that one, but I really thought Iowa State was going to knock off Virginia. But, they just didn't have it. They've been inconsistent all season. It wasn't their game. But other than that, I thought it was pretty straightforward in the Sweet 16.
Paulie, anything that stood out to you in the Sweet 16 play?
Well, first off, I want to talk about Nick's comment that Duke was impressing this tournament. He struggled against UNC Wilmington and against Yale, so impressive.
Did not struggle against UNC Wilmington.
They did.
Were not
in the
winning
first half, how much did they end up winning by? Oh, they won by eight. Still,
big margin.
Hey,
and
getting out of the first round in the tournament doesn't matter who you play. Michigan State didn't get out. not a good team now? Is that what
That doesn't mean that they're impressive. It's not. You're
Hey,
acting like they were so impressive, like they were winning by 50 and whatever.
they beat Yale too.
Powerhouse.
Yale beat
UVA,
Baylor.
Yale beat Baylor. You're just stating facts now.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that UVA Iowa State game too. Iowa State was only down like 3 or 4 points in the second half, and then George Niang got his fourth foul, I think, with 13 minutes to go. And by the time he came back in with 5 minutes left, they were down like 15. So I think that was a big point. I think there we kind of started to see Virginia's vulnerability against a good Iowa State team. But then Nick has said, I mean, without Niang, they're inconsistent. They really don't have that second person on their roster that could step up and be the leader. Yeah, I don't know. The games weren't that great. The Notre Dame Wisconsin game was good, but not a huge Notre Dame fan, so that wasn't really a good one. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, stuff going on here. Well, yeah, like you said, I'm sorry, I had a few videos playing there in the background. Yeah, no, nothing I saw too crazy in the Sweet 16. I agree with Nick. I thought, like Paulie said, Duke not playing anything special. They were moving on, and we got everything going on now. We got the Reese's ads playing. I got playing. No, I thought Duke was going to maybe be able to move on against Oregon. Not like they were playing amazing, but they were playing better basketball than what it seemed like they were playing entering the tournament. It seemed like Brandon Ingram was really kind of turning into his own, late in the season, was playing pretty well in the tournament. I thought maybe he was going to have a better game, and that team collectively maybe would play better. But we saw Oregon, a team out in the Pac-12, who didn't get a lot, I think, respect throughout the year nationally. Not a lot of people probably seen a Oregon Ducks game the whole year, but they handled Duke in the Sweet 16 and respectively moved on to the Elite Eight. But other than that game, I mean, I thought the rest of them were pretty chalked up like they were supposed to be. And then moving in, so then let's move to the Elite Eight, obviously, after the Sweet 16. Saturday and Sunday were all the Elite Eight games. Let's just start up in the South region. Well, no, let's not start with that game. Let's start down with, in the West region, Oregon moving on to play the Oklahoma Sooners. And, Buddy Hield, man, I'll tell you what, if he hasn't had the best senior year and just a year in college basketball alone, at 37 points, just showed how dominant of a player he is. His different abilities. Obviously, in that game, he was hot from behind the three-point line, hit 8 3-pointers. Can we easily say that Buddy Hield is easily player of the year this year in college basketball with that game? You probably didn't even need that game to name him player of the year, but did that game probably against Oregon solidify that he's this year's player of the year in college basketball? Paulie, start with you.
Yeah, I don't think without a doubt, especially Denzel Valentine losing in the first round. I think that was probably going to be his biggest competition. You could still see somebody like Bryce Johnson, who's still in the tournament, sneak into that conversation. But yeah, Buddy Hield's been amazing. His shooting is unbelievable. Offensively, I don't know that there's anybody in the draft that will be that is as explosive offensively as Buddy Hield. But that begs the question, because a lot of people have been talking about, is he just like an unbelievable college player, or is his game going to translate to the NBA? Because I don't know. I don't know if his shooting is gonna translate. I don't think he's like Jimmer, where he's just shooting from 35 feet away. I think he can create his own shot. But just in terms of this tournament, I mean, he's the player of the tournament in my mind. Like no matter what, even if Oklahoma doesn't win the championship.
Yeah, he was my player of the year even if he went out first round. This season was unbelievable. I think he's probably one of the more NBA-ready prospects this year.
Right.
Brandon Ingram, Ben Simmons are going to go 1 and 2, but they're going to take work. I think Buddy Hield's going to be the guy that comes in next year and contributes to whatever team he's on.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it was just a good win for Oklahoma. Obviously, in that game, they had a huge first half lead. We're up 48-30. Oregon snuck in a little bit, but that was Oklahoma pulled a bunch of their guys late. But the Sooners, I think a lot of people thought that they would make a run over in the West region of the bracket, and they did. And they, respectively made it to the Final Four. Lon Kruger, just another year of bringing this Oklahoma team to the tournament, and they finally have gotten over the hump and made that run on the back of Buddy Hield. So Sooners in the Final Four out of the West region. And then our other Elite Eight game, go up to the East region. North Carolina going up against our good friend Patrick Murday's Fighting Irish to Notre Dame. Notre Dame as a 6th seed, making it to the Elite Eight. Had, you don't want to say an easy path because it's March Madness and anybody can beat anybody, but Notre Dame definitely got a little bit lucky. It felt like throughout the tournament, didn't have to play the number 3 seed in West Virginia. They beat SF Austin. Wisconsin beat Xavier, who was the 2 seed. So then Notre Dame played a good game against Wisconsin in the Sweet 16 and move on. In the Elite Eight, though, Notre Dame was in the game, to say the least. Demetrius Jackson had a really good game. But North Carolina, man, I'll tell you what, just out-rebounded the crap out of them. I think it was 32-15 on the boards for North Carolina, and Notre Dame just had no answer for Bryce Johnson. Anything in that game that stood out to you guys? It was a close game if you watched it back and forth. Obviously, the score doesn't, 14-point win for the Tar Heels. But is North Carolina, are they looking like right now they're going to be the team to beat moving forward with that win over Notre Dame in the Elite Eight? Nick, your thoughts?
I would definitely say they're the team to beat, not solely off of that game, but just off of their body of work this whole tournament. You can see how deep they are. It seems like it's somebody else stepping up every game. You know what Bryce Johnson's going to bring, but Marcus Page has stepped up his game a little bit in this tournament too. They're just so deep. I was talking about this our last video. They seem like they got everything. They got multiple big men that you can put in the game and contribute for them. And then they got the guard play with Joel Berry, Justin Jackson, and Marcus Page. They can all play. Now, Notre Dame did impress me a little bit more in this tournament than I thought they would. They came in really just a 2-man team, I felt like, with Demetrius Jackson and Zach August. And they did get some lucky breaks getting to play Wisconsin and, what was that, Sweet 16? And stuff like that. But, I mean, UNC is just too much for them. I thought that's exactly how that game was going to go. They were going to keep it close, but UNC was going to pull away later on because they were just simply a better team. There was nothing Notre Dame could do.
Yeah, North Carolina, they really looked like a 1 seed more than a lot of the teams we've seen in the tournament. I mean, like Nick said with the depth, every time a big man came out, they bring another guy who is 6'10", 260, and just took up the entire lane. It's unbelievable. Especially when Zach August got in foul trouble. I mean, they had Bryce Johnson on the block against, at some points Vestoria, and at other points Bonzi Colson. They never had a chance. I mean, it was they throw it in the block to Bryce Johnson, one dribble turn, and an easy jumper. But yeah, North Carolina looked like the 1 seed. They looked like the team that Syracuse is going to have a lot of trouble with, and that whoever on the other side, Oklahoma or Villanova, they would have a lot of trouble with too.
Well, and I think none of us, I wanted them to get to the Final Four of the Irish just so that we could bring Patrick Murday on the show and have him as a guest, because we would have had to bring him on if Notre Dame would have upset North Carolina. But, the Tar Heels moving on. And it seemed like Notre Dame had a chance, but North Carolina just too big and too strong down low and just out-rebounded them. So Tar Heels as the 1 seed, moving out of the East region into the Final Four. And then another game that the Tar Heels will now take on in the ACC, Syracuse. Really the story of this tournament, 10 seed, have worked their way through. And another team that, you might say got a little lucky because didn't have to face the number 2 seed in Michigan State, who got upset by Middle Tennessee. Syracuse then went on, played Gonzaga, who was the 11 seed, and barely just got by them. Gonzaga played them a good game in the Sweet 16. Move on to take on the number 1 seed in Virginia. It was probably one of the better games of the Elite Eight. They were down by as many as, I think it was 12 or 14 points at halftime. They were down 14 at half, and their second straight game, they come back with a huge second half. And Syracuse, a lot of people didn't even think were going to maybe get into this tournament. For a while, they were a bubble team. They lost 5 of their 6 games coming in. So, obviously a shocker. I don't think any of us thought, the Orange were going to be making this deep of a run in the tournament. But are they a threat? Are they going to be a threat? And were you surprised that Virginia, it seems like the last 4 years, they've just had so many good teams regular season-wise. And it seemed like this was going to be the team poised to finally get Tony Bennett and this really good Virginia team throughout the year to the Final Four, but they just, second half absolutely lost it. What are some of your guys' thoughts from that Syracuse-Virginia game? Nick, we could start with you.
Syracuse definitely should have lost that game. I think it was more just a Virginia collapse than anything Syracuse necessarily did. I think Paul wrote an article about their zone, though, that their zone always keeps them in a game. It seems like at any point they can start and make that big run with that zone if teams aren't shooting the ball well. And I just think that it's one of the worst Cinderella runs we've had, honestly. Like what Paul wrote again, I was reading his article this morning where he was saying there's, 4 teams that have been double-digit seeds that made the Final Four, and I think by far there's the worst run. They played Dayton, which was their first game. Dayton's probably one of the worst 7 seeds in this thing. Then they played Middle Tennessee, and then what else was that? Gonzaga, and I mean Gonzaga's what, an 11, and then they got their win against Virginia. So basically, they have one good true win in this tournament, and that wasn't even a complete game they played. It's like all these Cinderella runs end. Nobody ever goes on from the Cinderella run to win the championship or anything. They all lose. Even Butler lost with that half-court heave. They all lose. They're going to lose their next game in North Carolina probably by 20. But it's a nice story.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a nice story. I mean, Nick said everything I was going to say. Syracuse sucks. They're going to get killed by North Carolina. North Carolina is just too big and too long for that zone to do anything. They've been shooting the ball way too well. Marcus Page has been unconscious from 3 this tournament. I don't think it's even going to be close. Their game against Virginia, I hate to do it again, but I agree with Nick that Virginia, it was really them that collapsed. Like, if you can't break a press still and you're, the number 1 seed, that's just embarrassing. They couldn't break a press, and I get Syracuse has a good defense, has a good press. But if you can't break that press, you have an All-American on your team. You have a 3 or 4 year starter in your backcourt. You can't break a press. You can't break a zone. You don't know what you're doing. Virginia deserved to lose. Not that Syracuse deserved to win, but Virginia deserved to lose for how stupid they played.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Virginia, it just, they're up. I think it was about 9 with 8 minutes left in that game, and Syracuse just kept slowly inching their way back into the game. But yeah, Virginia definitely lost it. They lost it to themselves, not being able to break that press, as Paulie said. But that 2-3 of Syracuse has gotten them through this tournament. They only had one game where they've shot higher than 45% from the field. Offensively, it's been kind of hit or miss for them, but their defense and they're playing team basketball, and that's what's really getting them through this tournament. I don't know if I quite believe that they're going to get killed by North Carolina like you two, but that's going to be a later video. We're going to have a Final Four preview. We'll get into that matchup. But Syracuse, they're the Cinderella of this tournament right now. How good of a Cinderella, a lot of people are debating. I don't think any of us really think it's that great of a story. But as a 10 seed, they're in the Final Four coming out of the Midwest region, and we'll take on North Carolina in the Final Four. And then our last Elite 8 game of the weekend was probably, in my mind, one of the better games probably of the tournament. Number 1 seed Kansas versus number 2 Villanova in the South region. A great game, to say the least. Back and forth. It was a game of runs. Villanova would go on a 10-0 run. Kansas then went on a 12-0 run. It was just a back-and-forth basketball game. Obviously, Villanova pulling it out 64-59, upsetting the number 1 overall seed in Kansas. And let's start with Nick. I know, Nick, you weren't very big on this Villanova team coming into the tournament, but it seems like this team is just playing team basketball. That win against Kansas in the Elite 8 was a team win. Before that, I mean, they've really had a pretty dominant tournament. They've really just, I think they've beaten every team by more than 20. I think it was,
Wichita by 8.
Who?
Oh, no, never mind.
That's Miami, buddy. They
beat Iowa by 19.
Killed Iowa. They killed their first
match. 19, not 20.
They moved their way through this tournament, and it's been quite impressive. And it was a good team win against Kansas. So I think, if anything, you've got to be a little shocked that they've made this run. What are your thoughts on this Villanova team now, looking at it as opposed to 2 weeks ago?
I mean, I didn't like them. I still don't like them, but I mean, you got to respect them. They're playing probably the most consistent basketball of anybody outside of North Carolina. You know what they're going to bring every game. They're all consistent. What is the white guard's name? Araka. Yeah, some ridiculous name. It just happened to be his birthday, which everybody knows you don't lose on your birthday on games like that. But I want to take you to a point in the fourth quarter. My boy from Kansas dives for the ball, gets the ball, runs into the dude's leg, and they call a foul on him.
Absolutely fouls him.
Absolutely awful call. Changed the game for them. Awful call. I blame that game solely on that play. I was there screaming at the TV.
All right. You done? Are you good?
Yeah.
I got 2 things. First off, I think I figured out your hate for Villanova is because you're still salty that Stevenson beat y'all your senior year. Second off,
I also was yelling at Jalen Brunson every time he touched the ball.
Second off,
derogatory things.
all right, reel back in. Second off, absolutely a foul at the end. Just because you're going for the ball doesn't mean that you're
If
automatically
both guys are
not
going
fouling
for if
somebody.
both guys are going for the ball though.
Doesn't mean you're not fouling somebody.
No, it's not like he hit
If
the
you
guy.
dive at a guy and
He
tackle
has
him,
the
you
ball.
can't just say
He
I'm
didn't
going for the
tackle him.
ball.
He didn't tackle him. He
He
had
did
the
tackle
ball.
him.
No, I did not. No,
He
did
wrapped
not.
him up on the thighs. He wrapped him
No,
up.
he did
Took him to
not
the
wrap.
ground.
You said it like he tackled him. He had the
Yeah,
ball.
okay,
He
but
had the
there has to
ball.
be some
He had
limitations.
the
You
ball.
can't just go diving at people's knees.
No, you got to let the guys
The
play.
guy had
In
the
a
ball
close
in his
game like
hand.
that,
He
you
had the
let the
ball.
boys play.
You don't let the boys
You
play
let
when
them
it could
play. Oh,
tear
you
somebody's
got to.
ACL.
You got to. Who's going to get their ACL torn?
That guy Villanova guy whose knee got dove into.
Oh, good Lord. Jesus. That's not good.
All right, but I know that is a big call in that point of the game. It was a very big call. It changed the momentum. It seemed like Kansas was itching back into it. That foul changed the momentum. Villanova went to the line. I think they hit 2 free throws because they were in the bonus.
They didn't miss a free throw at the end. They hit like 8 straight.
Yeah, and they were consistent at the free throw line. But, I mean, you got to fault Kansas, and they were sloppy with the basketball, 16 turnovers. And a lot of them, it was just them moving too fast. Frank Mason got a little out of control throughout the game. And then, obviously, the other big story, their star, Perry Ellis, who had 7 points it was in the Sweet 16, was held to 4 points. You got to credit Nova. They switch up their defenses. They don't really have a true big man other than Ochefu, who's like 6'9" down low. But they switch up between the 2-3 and man, and it really threw off Kansas, I think. And Ellis only scoring 4 points, I think, was a huge difference maker in the game. And you got to credit the Wildcats. I love Jay Wright. I think he's a really good coach. They proved Nick wrong. I was happy. I think Paul and I had Villanova get into this game. Didn't have them winning, but it was a great basketball game. It was the best Elite Eight game, I think, of the weekend. And they move on to the Final Four, so they'll be taking on Oklahoma on that side. So Villanova, Oklahoma over on the left side in the Final Four, and then on the right side it is number 1 seed North Carolina versus number 10 seed Syracuse. So an interesting Final Four that I don't think anybody had on ESPN. There was no perfect brackets. I don't think too many people would have had that Final Four, but if you did, that's quite impressive. I believe in the Crossover Report Challenge, who do we say is leading it? I think it is Lauren Redaimo, who would have guessed? It's a tight race. I think there's a lot of different people that can win it right now. I'd say Chris Gliatone, who has Oklahoma winning it all, and he's sitting in 3rd place. If Oklahoma gets past, a lot of people had Kansas. There's a lot of people sitting there between 4 and I think 7 that have North Carolina winning it. So it could go either way depending on, I think, who gets out of these Final Four games and who gets to the championship. So the Crossover Report Challenge is up for grabs right now. $15 Visa gift card still on it. So see who wins that. I think that's going to do it for us. That was a little bit of a Sweet 16, Elite 8. And then, as we said, as we get closer to it, we'll do a Final Four preview. I believe Friday morning is our planned video day. We'll talk more about the matchups this Saturday. Final Four is Saturday, national championship game next Monday. So college basketball coming to a close, but still some important basketball games left to play. Any final thoughts from you two before we head out? Nick, Paul?
Nothing.
Nothing? All right.
Little Rock coach just got hired.
Yeah, I knew that would get thrown.
Boy.
I believe first team All-Americans were announced. Got to give a shout-out to our fellow Marian Catholic alum, Tyler Eulis, who we graduated with. Congratulations to him. That's a big accolade to put on a resume. And then it was Bryce Johnson, Valentine, Buddy Hield, and then who was
Brogdon.
Yeah, gotcha. So AP All-American team announced. Other than that, I think that's going to do it for us. Stay tuned for Friday. We'll come through with a full extensive preview of this Saturday's Final Four. And stay tuned for that. So we want to thank you for watching. As always, Nick Damiani, Paul Lamb, and myself, Neil Doyle. 3 guys, 1 mic, Crossover Report. We'll see you next time.